Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome back as we progress through Transformed by Values. This week we're looking at a totally different topic, subhanAllah. Chapter 7, we now move to the area of language skills and how does my language skills affect the quality of my thoughts, my responses, my behaviors, and through that, the most important reason and purpose of this book is how does it affect my Islamic values, ability to excel in them? So in this chapter, I introduce you to what's called the NLP model. And then we look at what is the meta model, of course, and what solution does it propose for the challenges that we face in our language. And then we look more specifically about in terms of our Islamic values, what are the benefits? And then there's a ton of activities for how we can effectively deal with what we call the distortions we have in our language, deletions and generalizations. And of course, I'm going to explain those in great detail as we move through this chapter, inshallah. So let me just close this and increase my screen. Okay, so my quote here, the summary of the importance of language, I'll read it out. Language resonates in our heart and mind, and then of course when it becomes thoughts, words, motive, speech, that's when we have accountability to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to ourselves and to our lives. So alhamdulillah, it's obviously a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's how we share our experiences, how we communicate, how we gain knowledge, understanding. So this chapter is all about how does it affect, how does my knowledge, understanding and skills in language affect my my thought patterns, my values, practices, etc. So naturally we begin with, well, what's the Islamic connection here? What does the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say about language? Well, Allah says in the Quran, not a word does he utter, but there is a watcher by him ready to record it. SubhanAllah, that for me is quite a powerful statement about, putting aside the whole language thing, even just a word, because once the word is out, once we've expressed it, we are now accountable for it. And we know some words can create, positivity, other words can create negativity. So we want to, learn more about that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says, say to my servants that they should only say those things that are best and always speak the truth. So if I could summarize this model, what I love about it is it just helps you to get closer to your ability to ensure that you are avoiding false thinking and speaking from a place of accurate knowledge, information about your experiences, about what's going on, so that you can live as much in a state of truth in your life, inshallah. So yes, subhanAllah, the heaviness of the accountability and responsibility, hence why I really advocate us becoming skilled in the content that I'm going to be sharing in a minute. And the Prophet ﷺ on the same topic talks about hadith. He says, let whosoever believes in Allah in the last day either speak good or be silent, subhanAllah. And then another one, indeed, a servant will speak a word pleasing to God that he might think that he thinks to be insignificant, but because of it, Allah raises him by many degrees, subhanAllah. And indeed, a servant will speak a word displeasing to God that he thinks to be insignificant, but because of it, he will consign him to hellfire. So, subhanAllah, this just totally, summarizes for us the importance of being aware of, how can I be more vigilant about what and how I think and the words I use. It's not just the words, obviously, but the words are the byproduct of our thoughts and how we are using our, the programming inside, how we are developing habits, because these all become, these lead to the kind of communication and thoughts we have, etc. So, we obviously can, we know that language and speech has so much power because it leads us to act. to respond. So mastering how to understand and use language is so important for anyone who wants to excel in their values. So where is the starting point? The starting point is, well, how do I even produce language? So I'm not going to go into a very scientific aspect of it. But from a personal development perspective, I love this next model that I'm going to introduce you to. It's called the NLP model of communication. And basically what it says is that, okay, we all know we experience the world through our 5 main senses, right? And our subconscious mind, right, can absorb and store everything that's happening around us because it's so powerful. Estimated of what they say is like, for example, 2,000 bits of information per second into our subconscious mind. But our conscious mind can obviously only handle, roughly about 126 bits per second. Otherwise, it would fry. It would be too much, So when you're, looking, in an experience, you can't focus on everything at once and give your full attention. Alhamdulillah, that Allah created us that we, otherwise, it would be all over the place. So what does this mean in terms of how our mind works? So, basically, okay, so we've got our 5 senses here, so we're seeing things, hearing, feeling, tasting, smelling, talking, right? And, there's, for example, an external event, enters us, our experience, or obviously it can be internal as well, how we're thinking. And because what I just described above with the subconscious mind, it needs to filter things so that we can have a conscious experience. And so how does it do this? It does this through these 3 processes called deletion, distortion, generalization. So it will delete things in our experience that are not related to these criteria, or it will distort things, or it will generalize things. So these are like, 3 software programs, I suppose, for how our mind filters. So it's going to filter things based on our attitude. So if we've got a particular attitude and we're having an experience, well, we're only going to see things according to our attitude. Or whatever our values and beliefs are, we're only going to see things according to the level and the nature of our values and beliefs. Our meta programs, I won't sort of go into that, but it's basically about the patterns and habits that we have. Decisions. So if, that's why decisions are so powerful. The type of decisions is similar to goals. So whatever our goals and decisions are, our mind is going to filter things according to that. How we store and represent our memories is going to affect how we experience, our daily experiences, our language, and then our language, of course, the nature of our language and then the quality of our language, etc. And then the last one is time, space, matter. How do we experience time, space, matter? So I'm not going to go into detail here, but that's just a little bit to give you an overview. And then from that experience, which obviously happens at a super, super fast, our mind, is like this faster than the fastest computer on the planet, or all of them put together. We then create an internal representation of what we're experiencing. We get a picture in our head, or we're looking at something, etc. So we're now, got something that's, thoughts, etc. about what's going on, or feelings. And that's impacting our state. So our state, it's now creating the state we're in, happy, worried, etc. And again, because our state is connected to our physiology. So it's they're impacting each other. And so there's like a flow going on. And that is then leading to, whatever response, behavior, action, result. Yeah. So that's kind of like a really nice, succinct summary of the communication model. So, so this is obviously all happening at a deeper level, in our subconscious mind. And so this is another illustration of it. So we're having, information is being distorted, deleted, generalized, and then we get the surface structure, our thoughts and our language. So language, as you can imagine, is actually far removed. And the thoughts we're having verbalizing or internally is actually far removed from the actual experience, because the actual experience, Allah is al-Haq. He knows everything that's happening. Al-Alim. We can only know a certain amount of what's going on in our experience, So How does distortions, deletions, and generalizations affect our language? You might be sort of getting an idea of that. Well, as we know, we can't fully convey, what's happening. We do our best to attempt based on, our memories, our language, our decisions, etc., our values and beliefs, etc. So, and one other thing about this process is it works for positive purposes, and then there's also some, there are negative implications here as well. So positive purposes, for example, when we distort, if we weren't able to distort information or delete, we wouldn't be able to be creative, think about the future, or generalize, be hopeful about things. So there's a whole, I suppose, criteria there. On the flip side, a lot of negative states happen as a result of the kind of distorting or deleting or generalizing we are doing. For example, when someone's feeling lonely, sometimes it can be because they're deleting the knowledge that, that they do have friends, or that they know of possible connections, or being impatient can sometimes be due to distorting what you think, someone else's intention is. Or excessive worry can be, maybe due to generalizing, the worst possible scenario. So there's millions of possibilities. And as we go through this, you're probably, you're obviously going to be starting to get light bulbs on your own experience and what are some of your patterns, in terms of, where do you delete, distort, generalize in a way that's you need to address, because of, it's impacting the way you want to be able to practice your Islamic values. So what is the solution? According to the meta model, the solution is basically asking strategic set of questions, and these questions are life-changing. I remember when I did my first training, I took all these questions, and I've got a chart. It's over 2 pages. I'll show you in a minute. And I literally memorized these, and they just transformed everything about my life and my thoughts and my patterns. So what these strategic questions do, which I'll show you in a minute, is they help you to have more access to your subconscious mind, where, there's more information there, and your deeper levels of wisdom, your deeper mental layers, I suppose. So it helps you to recover information that's been distorted, deleted, generalized, clarify the meaning more accurately, or have more choice in how you think. So the bottom line, it helps you to reconnect language to the source. So there's many, many benefits in terms of your Islamic values. You obviously gain more high quality, accurate information. You can be more aware of false assumptions you might be having and be able to challenge them. It'll obviously mean that you can improve the quality of your relationships. You can get to the heart of and truth of matters more easily, specify, clarify things more. So the bottom line is it can help to improve and change the way you think and perceive. So, and, obviously be able to access greater levels of truths about situations. And as we all know, Islam is founded on truth. Prophet ﷺ said, honesty certainly leads to goodness, and goodness leads to paradise, subhanAllah. So let's get started on, let me just, this beautiful verse from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, "Oh, you who have faith, be wary of Allah and be with the truthful." So we all know about, Islam is founded on truth. So, okay, let's have a look now at we'll start with distortions, then we'll move to the other two. So distortions is basically when we take an experience and we change it in some way, right? So we change it based on the filters, and we're not obviously consciously or actively changing it. It's happening all in the back of your mind, like the back of a computer. It's happening on its own based on the programs you've installed, right? So we want to be able to, know a bit more about what's going on in our mind and be able to, make sure we're aligning it to our Islamic values. So there's 3 types of distortions. Number 1 is called mind readings. So this is where we assume to know another person's state, right? you know, like, oh, you know, that person doesn't really appreciate me, but then you don't have any evidence, or, oh, he did that, so he's ungrateful. But again, you know, so the idea here is that when we find ourselves mind reading, these are the kind of questions we want to ask ourselves. You know, how do I know that? What evidence do I have to support that? What specifically, what did I see, hear, and feel? So what specifically do I mean by, you know, they are unrespectful or unlovable or arrogant, whatever? Or was it the whole time, or just when I did such and such? So these kind of questions just help you to get to the heart of the matter and become more honest and truthful in the way you are perceiving. Yeah. Okay. So with each one, as I'm going through it, it'd be really phenomenal if you're considering your own, you know, connection to your own experiences. And in the book, of course, I encourage you to take the time aside and do the activities where you're reflecting on examples that you use, common patterns that you have. So that way, you know, specifically when they happen again in the future, you know how to challenge them with these, you know, amazing strategic questions that help you to improve how you're thinking. The second example is cause and effect. So this is where someone's words or behaviors has controlled your response. And so, for example, where someone says, oh, I feel annoyed if blah, 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 blah. You know, I get disappointed when blah, blah, blah. So this is not saying, okay, you know, we shouldn't feel negative emotions. We need to feel them when we need to feel them, when they're valid. But the question is, we have to judge if this is something where we are letting someone else control our response. And what is your goal in terms of being able to, you know, on an Islamic values level, be able to, you know, master yourself, I suppose, in terms of taking full control of your state, because at the end of the day, we are responsible for how we respond. So that, again, that's, you know, I'm sure you're gathering why this is just so valuable, you know, to someone who wants to live a life founded on the highest values embodiment. You know, so again, the powerful questions that we can use to deal with these kind of distortions are things like, you know, we can, when someone says or does, you know, blah, 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 and I respond negatively, who is making the response? You know, how does someone else's negative behavior make me produce my negative responses? How exactly does this cause that, you know, or what or how would I like to think, say, do, or feel instead? So I remember, you know, again, when I first, you know, studied these and learned these in my training, it was like someone was saying, wow, I don't need to be at the mercy of, you know, other people. I can actually take control of my responses. I can, you know, take that full responsibility back and work on improving myself, because we can't change others, but of course, through our role modeling, people will change. Or, you know, that's a beautiful blessing. So yes, subhanallah. Okay, and then the third type is presuppositions. These are basically assumptions we make, judgments, and opinions. And again, we have to be really careful. There's a verse in the Quran which says that some assumptions are sin. So again, accountability. So and of course, we need to be able to make assumptions, judgments, opinions about life, about ourselves. But the question is, where is it adversely affecting my Islamic values, or where is it not, you know, in line with my values, my Islamic values that I want to, you know, really refine? For example, oh, he gets angry very quickly, which proves his lack of good character. So you've made an assumption here. Or someone is saying, oh, her constant complaining shows how ungrateful she is. Okay. So again, these are assumptions, you know, and the assumption here is that you know what's in that person's mind, or that anger means someone doesn't have a good character. So you can see how harmful these are to the implications of, you know, making these kind of assumptions, judgments, opinions, you know. and how much that would affect a relationship or any relationships. So the questions here are, how specifically do I know? Am I saying blah, blah, blah? Am I assuming? So when you catch yourself, making these kind of assumptions, judgments, or opinions, ask yourself these powerful questions, and then it'll get you to come back to your own truth and align yourself back to, your standards of Islamic excellence, inshallah. So, and as we can understand from these examples, this is where most misunderstandings happen. It happens from inaccurate language, from the kind of assumptions or judgments or mind reading, etc. So a great, a personal solution as well that I suggest is, whenever you're in a situation where, these kind of thought patterns popping up, or say you're engaging with someone and you're noticing something that, is, not to your liking or whatever, get into a state of curiosity, because what curiosity does, it makes you consider, what else could this mean? Maybe there's something else going on. And just the question, what else could this mean, is one of my favorite questions, because it straight away stops my mind from making a judgment or an assumption, or just taking like a negative spin on something, and recognizing that, there's always going to be a good meaning to something, or maybe this person is so stressed and they don't even realize what they're doing, or blah, 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 So I don't know, whatever the situation, whatever, it calls for, your job is just to, act within whatever your representations are of your Islamic values. Okay, so now let's move on to deletions. So deletions part 2 is where you delete part of your experience, and again, we can't know everything about life. So, so for example, some examples of negative deletions here is where someone's like, oh, okay, so something's happened and they're like, oh, there's no point in trying, or, when you're saying I'm irritated or frustrated, you're obviously deleting something, deleting other things, that maybe happening, or, other positive things in your life, etc. There's always going to be something you're deleting. So, and again, just on that note, it's not about not expressing how you're feeling, but, that's a very simple statement to make. But obviously the context to that is what matters, in what context are you saying I'm irritated, So the question is, to challenge that is, at what or where or when exactly, so you're just getting more information about what's going on in your experience, frustrated at what, at where, at when, especially because sometimes if we're stressed, we can sort of say things and we're not really, again, we're distorting things. And the problem is, if you stay there in that, thought pattern, then that will, lead to, can lead to, it's like magnetic. You'll start having similar thoughts like that, whatever you're focusing on grows, wherever you're putting your energy and attention is going to, grow. And so it's about noticing the initial stages, so we can, again, ensure that we are, trying to live with a high level of truth in our life. Another example is deleting the comparator. Maybe there's a lot here. I'm just thinking, I might skip some, but obviously, with the book, you can go through these at your own pace. So the comparator is where the person is saying they're comparing themselves against something else. So for example, I'm not smart enough to study at university, but I'm smarter according to who, what more. So again, it's just about, and comparisons are, we've got to be so careful with, comparing ourselves to what, to whom. And we know that the standards in Islam is, Prophet ﷺ said, always compare yourself to someone who has less than you, otherwise, if not, then it's going to open up negativity, So in other words, asking a question like that, I'll just jump back to that. what it's going to do, your mind's going to say, oh, well, you know, when you're saying, okay, I'm not smart enough to study, compared with whom? You know, so there's 7 billion people on the planet. So again, it's just getting you to avoid sort of ambiguity, and just really getting into the being more crisp and succinct with the way you're thinking. Another example is deleting, and here sounds a bit grammatical here, deleting elements in a noun. So, you know, someone saying, you know, I'm always fearful, I have a bad memory, etc. So here it's about, how do I turn this noun back into a verb? So, for example, okay, fear. What exactly are you fearful about? You know, sometimes I hear people saying, oh, I have anxiety, I have fear, but it's really important to, you know, become aware of, you know, am I just, you know, using a language pattern that's, you know, not really connected to something, you know, that needs to be addressed, you know, because obviously whatever we're speaking, our body is going to start to feel it, you know, it's going to impact our thoughts. So it's really important to take control of your personal way of interpreting, you know. I'm not downplaying, you know, fear, anxiety or anything of those things, but I'm just saying that, you know, and I know this, even my own experience, you know, there have been times where, you know, I've made statements like this and then I've thought, wait, you know, how do I turn that ambiguous noun back into, well, what exactly what's the action that I'm talking about here, you know. And then the other example is, you know, deleting details of the verb, you know. So here the verbs are things like, he hurt me, she walks all over me, you know. And so the way to challenge it is to ask, well, what exactly do I mean here? So again, just getting down into more accurate information, or how exactly, how specifically. Okay, and I'll just jump. Yeah, okay. And now let's move to the last category, which is generalizations. So this is where we take one idea, incident, example, and then we act as if it represents the whole, you know. So I'll give you a sort of, you know, two extremes. So someone meets a Muslim for the first time, and that, let's say they're not Muslim, and, you know, and they say, oh, you know, gosh, you know, you'll hear this, oh, Muslims are really nice people, you know, if they've had a good experience with that person. Or someone sees, you know, a negative representation of Muslims on TV or whatever, and they're like, oh, Muslims are blah, 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 or Chinese are blah, blah, or Russians are, you know. So as human beings, we have this, you know, subhanAllah, that's the negative side of things, and we have to be careful because, subhanAllah, you know, whatever we're saying, we are accountable. So if we've made a negative statement about a whole ethnicity, well, excuse me, like I remember this sheikh in a talk, he said, we're accountable to, you know, whatever statements we are making. So, you know, that's why it's so important, of course, to, you know, when we do our istighfar and asking Allah for forgiveness, to actually, you know, be mindful of the ways we might have overstepped, you know, the boundaries of our values. So a way to address this is to do things like ask these sort of strategic questions like, well, you know, who says so? By what standards? What could or would happen if I did? You know, is it, you know, always or never, etc. So these kind of questions just help you to take back the, you know, to unravel this generalization and be more specific, I suppose, about it. Or a really classic example is, why does this always happen to me? So if something happens once or twice, and then the person is saying always, you know, so always means always, it means every day for the last how many years. So again, this is a really classic generalization, and it's, you know, it's very debilitating, you know. It can have a lot of negative consequences. You can feel miserable when you use this kind of language, you know. So again, when you memorize these kind of strategic questions and you find yourself doing that, you can challenge it straight away. You can say, hold on, you know, what can I learn from this? You know, how can I benefit from this? What's the gift in this from Allah? What does Allah want me to learn about myself here? So these are some other, you know, personal questions that we can use to address generalizations. So, you know, subhanAllah, and of course, our beliefs play a big part in that, as you can imagine. So that's those three concepts, and I've done a summary chart for you in the book on page 121. So this is phenomenal. I would highly recommend, you know, you print these, you memorize them, you know, you will just start becoming, it will just, you know, as you can imagine, and as I've mentioned, it will just change the whole way you are thinking about things, believing, the way you practice your values, in so many ways, subhanAllah. So, all right, well, I'm going to finish off there. And, oh, yeah, just some tips. So start using, once you've got the summary chart, and you've, you know, start using it on your own dialogue, on your own speech and thoughts, you know, and be aware of yourself and stop yourself as soon as you realize, okay, I've kind of, you know, I've deleted something here, I've distorted the way things are, I've generalized, you know, challenge it immediately. And then you get good at it. You know, the more you practice it, the more obviously you're going to get, you know, skilled at it, inshallah. All right, we'll see you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'd love to hear your feedback. Inshallah, we'll see you next time. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.